What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another DIY from Howdy C7 owners. As always, I'm Cameron. Today, we are going to be replacing my Gen 1 MercRacing Heat Exchanger with a Gen 3 4-liter turbo, twin turbo heat exchanger from MercRacing. This is their newest, biggest, baddest option that you can get from MercRacing. There's a few things in here that are very special. We did do a unboxing video and talked about this one versus the V3 version of the 3.0T heat exchanger. Just because this is meant for the S-Lines and RS line 4-liter twin turbo engine doesn't mean you can't put it on your 3-liter engine. We're going to do that today. We're going to put it on our 3.0T supercharged engine. There are some special things about this one and the V3 that we couldn't talk about in the unboxing video and still can't talk about it because Jose is waiting for a patent to get approved. But I can definitely say this without a doubt, and anybody can doubt me on this, but these are worth an upgrade, especially if you are doing high horsepower output for your 3-liter, especially your 4-liter engines. These are definitely worth it. If you're just doing like dual pulley, daily driver, fun car, stick with the 3.0T V3 variant if you want to. But if you're planning on going E40, E85, or ported charger with port matched throttle body and trying to get as much as you can out of this engine, I would highly suggest you get this one. So today we're going to be swapping this out with this one. Shouldn't be too bad. I don't think we have to do a little bit of modification, but as you can see, I've already got the front end prepped here. We're just going to have to clamp off the coolant hoses to try and save as much coolant as we can. Drain the coolant out of this guy, remove it. This thing, as you can see here, is a decent bit wider than the one that we've already got on the car, and so we're gonna have to remount it into the crash bar, which shouldn't be too bad because this has self-tapping screws now, which nobody's had an issue with the self-tapping screws because a lot of people are used to the pass-through screws that went through the actual crash bar on the original and just second-gen vents, or I'm sorry, second-gen variants of these, but a lot of people have been using the self-tappers without issue, so that's probably what we're gonna do with this. So I'm gonna show you how to do this. We're gonna get it on there, we're gonna Datalog and see what the difference is between this and this. Now, I do have air in my system, a little bit of air, not too much, but my IATs are a little bit high, but we're gonna get a base log with this on there, and then once that's done, I'm gonna do another video showing how to install the CWA 100 coolant pump, and we're gonna log that and see the difference between just a upgraded heat exchanger versus upgraded heat exchanger plus the coolant pump, so you guys know the difference of how that works on these cars. So, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and we're gonna get into the swap. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do to prep for this is we need to drain the coolant out of the current heat exchanger that we have on here. Best thing in the world for this, guy, is to make your life a lot easier and preserve the coolant that you have in the car is to get you some actual hose clamps. These are Harbor Freight. I think they were $15 for the pair, and they work great. I used them when I did my trans cooler, the NA2 valve, to swap that out. It worked perfectly. And so as you can see here, I've got one hose here that comes off the bottom right. I've got this hose that comes out of the top. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pinch off down here. I'm gonna pinch off over there because this hose, this complete hose is coming off no matter what. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pinch it off so that there's no flow coming from the actual car. And then I'm gonna disconnect this first so that we can drain from the bottom of the heat exchanger. That way when I take this off, there shouldn't be a ton of fluid coming out of this. We're gonna drain from the bottom, and then likely after that, I'm gonna unconnect from there to let that drain out into here, and then we'll disconnect everything, and after that we'll start to actually get this thing removed. The car. There we go. All right, so these should be shut off. Make sure you have a drip pan or something underneath to catch this stuff, and we'll go ahead and start working on draining this. Okay, so we're gonna use an 8mm socket to remove the coolant lines, or I should say to loosen up the hose clamps here. Now these have been on for I think about 2 years. This is the first performance mod I ever did for the channel. MercRacing was actually our first main sponsor. Shout out to Jose, one of the nicest dudes in this community. You can't ask for a nicer guy than that. But these are going to be on there pretty good. The original setup has plastic connectors in the middle that these two hoses connect to. They've held up really well, no issues, but I'm gonna have to probably take a pick and pry this coolant hose off of these because it's been on there for so long. But for now, just gonna get that loosened up. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen the other side while I'm here. Go. All right, got those loosened up, so we'll go ahead and start prying this apart and getting it drained. Everything. All right, so that's loose. All right, so now we need to get ready because I'm gonna pull this off of here. That'll be the easiest thing to drain. So I need to make sure that this is there, ready to catch the coolant. Let me see if I can find something good to go underneath there. Okay, got a box under here. Hopefully make this work and not spill coolant everywhere. So this is open. All right. We're gonna let this drain. As it starts to trickle out, I'll start to crack loose this hose up here, and that way we got good air coming through, because right now there's no air allowing to come through here, so it's creating a vacuum issue. So once this gets a good amount drained, I'll open that up and get the rest of it out, hopefully. Real quick, while this is draining, something I want to talk about. This was brought up on the last video, and I've even made a comment and pinned it on my original install video. As you can tell, this line here was connected to the bottom, this one right here, and then up top, this line goes down and behind the heat exchanger and connects way over there. These were backwards. I did not install them exactly as they were intended. This line should have been connected to up here. I should have had one coming down here, and then this line should have wrapped around the back and gone over and connected over there. So if you installed it this way from my first video, I do apologize that was the incorrect routing. Having said that, it didn't, for my setup, and I'm stage 2 single pulley, it didn't make any difference in terms of IATs from what other people had. So obviously, you know, we're looking to go dual pulley eventually, and even higher than that, we'd like to go ethanol and whatnot. So we want to make sure this is all done correctly. So we will be correcting that issue when we install the new heat exchanger. All right, this is starting to come to a drizzle, so we're going to crack the top open here and get the rest of this out. I can already see a good amount of coolant here. So I know this tube is going to be full of coolant, and something's telling me I should probably disconnect it over there first, but actually, you know what? I'm not going to be stubborn. I'm going to do it right and not make a giant mess. Stand by. Okay, so just to stop this from dripping, we just kind of set the hose back onto the end here. That way there's no drip going on my floor. We're going to go ahead and remove the hose over here from this side and let this tube here drain of coolant. There shouldn't be anything coming out of the heat exchanger. It should just be what's left in the hose. Then once we do that, we'll probably put that back together so it doesn't drip, and we'll completely disconnect this and make sure that the heat exchanger is completely drained. I got to make sure I save all of these hose clamps, because this is all going to go to whoever wins this heat exchanger. We're going to be doing a giveaway where someone's going to win this, and we're going to have another giveaway where they're going to win something else. So, by the way, if you're watching this, take the time. We're trying to raise our followers up on our Instagram page. So if you follow our YouTube and you don't follow us on Instagram, go give us a check out over there, because once we hit 2,000 followers on Instagram, we will be giving away a set of Send exhaust test pipes for a 3-liter supercharged engine. So that means C7s, SQ5s, Audi S4s, anybody applies. So go check it out, read up on how we're gonna do that, and subscribe. Please, help us out. There we go. Make sure I save that clamp. I save this clamp. I need heavier duty work gloves here. Okay, so now that that's off, we're going to go ahead and disconnect the hose from the top. Sorry for any mic issues. I need a wireless mic. There we go. All right, cool. So this hose is completely disconnected. So let's get it turned up and not leak out anywhere. All right, I'm gonna go set this part and we'll work on the next step. Set it. Okay, so now that we have this tube off, what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to focus on removing any of the extra tubes and hose clamps and the connector pieces. Like you see that plastic connector piece. We're going to pull that out because we got new metal ones, and that's going to go with this. I'm sending this all as one kit. So we're going to get all that stuff cleaned up, removed, out of the way, and then make sure we got nothing dripping. And once that's done, we're going to take off the crash bar, which is going to bring off the heat exchanger along with the crash bar and get everything out. But first, since we have this off, we're going to remove this again and see if any more coolant comes out. Let's see. A little bit in that, but it doesn't seem like there is really anything. I mean, there's going to be more coolant in this heat exchanger, but it's not going to come out until we actually get it tilted. So whenever we start to remove this, we're going to have to be really careful. And what I might do is I might disconnect this from the bracket here and there. I might actually try and get it off of the crash bar before I remove the crash bar. That way I can tilt it to pour anything else out that I need to. So anyways, I'm going to get this cleaned up and we'll keep moving. Okay, so I think my best course of action to do this without making a giant mess is to remove the bracket bolts here. There's 1, 2 here, 1, 2 here, and these just connect to the brackets that actually hold the heat exchanger to the car. And I think instead of trying to undo here or anything like that, if I just undo these, the bolts will stay in there. I can get these heads off here, and then I can slowly lower this corner down, because over here I can just remove one, leave one in here so it gets, you know, I can loosen it up, but it'll be able to tilt, and then I'll be able to control the flow of any coolant coming out of there. So let's see if this actually works. All right, I'm gonna work on this. I'll come back to the video whenever I figure it out. Okay, so finally got that bottom bolt removed. It just took a while using a couple regular wrenches. This bolt is in, but it's only in through the crash bar. There's no nut on the back of it. Over here, I got the bottom bolt removed. This one is still in with the nut attached, but it's loose. And this is gonna allow us to use this as a pivot point. So what we're gonna do is we are going to remove this bolt. I'm going to hold the bottom here. Actually, I'm going to hold it up here as I do it. Remove this bolt and then slowly let this angle down so that it drains into the pan. So you can see this is out. You can see all the coolant. And this will actually work out pretty well because it's still hanging by that one bolt over here. Now, as this comes back, it's gonna lean into some stuff on the car and stop there. So we're gonna let that drain completely. Once it does, we'll get this last bolt completely off, and then this will be completely removed from the car. And we'll get this out of the way. Once we do that, I'm gonna remove the crash bar. I'm gonna try and clean it up just a little bit. I'm gonna probably spray it again, spray it black again, because This is 2 years of dings and whatnot. I probably should have vinyl wrapped it the first time, but you know, it's easy to take off and spray over in the grass and make it look nice and clean again. And then after that, we'll get the new heat exchanger lined up. We're gonna mark where we need to put our self-tapping fasteners in, and we'll get the new heat exchanger mounted to the bar and get it put back in the car and start connecting things. Okay guys, sorry for there's a neighbor mowing the lawn in the background. Hope that doesn't interfere too much. We touched up the crash bar. It's not beautiful, smooth paint, but it's black all the way across. That's all I care about because it sits behind the grill. But what we're gonna do is we're going to work on getting the new heat exchanger mounted up to this. We cannot use the same holes that were there for the old heat exchanger because it's a much wider setup. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna mount the brackets onto the actual heat exchanger itself. And then we are going to line it up and just pretty much use, you know, best judgment, so to speak. I'm not gonna measure it perfectly and get it exact down to the detail center for this. We're gonna get it pretty close here. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take the actual mounting screws and we're going to go ahead and attach this to the heat exchanger. And I'm not gonna make these super tight because this might need some adjustment. The way on this one in particular, you know it's correct, is the really tall part is what's gonna mount to the actual crash bar, because this piece here, there's the shorter one, is long enough to get the bracket out past the front of the actual heat exchanger. So we're gonna get these in here, get these all started, and like I said, we're gonna keep them kind of loose so that we have some play here as we get everything situated. And then we'll figure out exactly where we're gonna mount our self-tapping screws to the crash bar. All right, I'm gonna get these snugged up and then we'll look at getting it mounted to the crash bar. So we just mounted the brackets to the heat exchanger and I went ahead and snugged them down. You've got play with the bracket, and that's just, you know, for whatever different kind of cars that these go on, Jose wanted to make sure that they could be adjusted properly for any car. But I went ahead and I torqued these down all the way because I've got this as far out as I can because this is a thick heat exchanger and I need this bracket to be past the front of the heat exchanger so that it can mount to the bar. And so with these all the way out, it barely clears the front of the heat exchanger. And so I've got them as far out and I've got them synced down. And so now we need to figure out where to mount it on the actual bar. Now, if you haven't seen my other video, one thing I highly recommend before you take your bar off of the car is to write top on the actual top side. And you can see it right there. That's from the last time I did it. It's still there. It shows me the top of the bar. That way I don't get confused when it's time to mount this. So for now, I'm just gonna play around with this. I'm gonna hold this up and see exactly where I need to mount this. You might have to go in and bend the brackets a little bit to have it fit flush to the actual crash bar. But honestly, once you get these mounted on there and you sink the bolts down onto the crash bar, it should pull the bracket to it pretty smooth and it'll hold on there nice and tight. So I'm gonna work on getting this centered up and I'll be right back with you once I know exactly where I'm gonna be putting these on. One thing I just realized, I'm not gonna be able to do what I wanna do where I just mount this to the bar and put it all on at once because there's not enough room behind this plate here to get a drill to the self-tapper to be able to drill it into the bar. That's a difference. My last one, remember, it stopped here, so I had plenty of room here on this to do whatever I wanted, and just like this side. But with this coming down here, I need room to get the drill to this bracket, so I'm gonna have to take this bracket off and mount it to the crash bar, as well as this one. Mount the brackets to the crash bar first, and then I'll put the crash bar onto the car, and then I'll be able to put the heat exchanger onto the bracket and tighten them down on there. So that's something that I just realized with the this new version having the downspout here. So I'm gonna go ahead and work on taking this off and then we'll figure this out here. So one thing that I am gonna do, I am going to try and find center. That'll help me in figuring out exactly where to space this. So I'm gonna use my old mounting points here because I remember I did center this the last time I installed it. And I'm just gonna measure from the center of those to the center of the old mounting points. And I'm going to Measure that out, and that is right at 20 inches. So right here at 10 inches is going to be near exact center, and that'll be close enough for me. So I'm gonna put a mark here with my silver Sharpie, which blends in perfectly with the daggone crash bar. Where did I put it? Where'd it go? I'm gonna have to find a black Sharpie because that didn't work out very well, did it? Let's try this again. As the heat exchanger falls on me because I'm playing with the table. All right, just gonna use my hat to steady it there. All right. Okay, got a center mark there, so now I can use that center mark to figure out exactly where I need to put these brackets. So I'm gonna use this, and this is where I'm just gonna use, well, you know, if I'm gonna be thorough, I guess I'll be completely thorough. I'm going to set this on its face, and I'll measure out center from here so that I can see it. So this is 24 inches wide. So we're gonna go to 12 on the heat exchanger. And I'm gonna mark on the back side here where no one's ever gonna see it. I'm gonna put a silver mark on 12, denoting the center of the heat exchanger. And I can use that to line up with the center mark on the bar. And this still isn't perfectly exact because I would need a center line down the whole thing here, but this will let me get in the ballpark of where I need to be with my brackets. I know I'm pretty awesome with my measuring techniques here. All right. What I can do, I can line these up and do some super technical way of doing this. All right, that's going to be one mounting bracket, and then the other one is going to be here. So those are approximate points. We'll see if those work out. I think it will. We'll get this on there and see how it works out. Okay, so what I've done, I had these attached to the heat exchanger and realized that wasn't gonna work, but while I was on there, what I did was I measured the center of each of the mounting points that are gonna mount to the crash bar. I measured the distance between the center of those, and it was 27.5 inches. So I put my 2 marks on here. I realized this wasn't a little short, so I extended it. So I have 2 marks that are 27.5 inches across. The curved bar makes it kind of difficult to get an exact measurement, but it's pretty close. Here's the thing, if it gets on there and you put it on and the heat exchanger doesn't fit perfectly, these brackets can bend a little bit. So you can mold these to your fitting, so to speak. So we're gonna go ahead and get these onto the crash bar, and I am just going to set these on here and just try and center the bracket to the actual bar itself and get these going. Once again, the curved bar doesn't do us any favors here. And my drill not having these magnetic on there doesn't help either. And once everything gets on there, like we have these mounted, these might not be perfectly level, but what we'll do is once the heat exchanger is on there and not completely perfectly tightened down, we will be able to actually get a level out and adjust the height. So I have this on here, just gonna set it there. All right, so that's started. I should be able to finish that off with a wrench and get that broken through, and then we'll work on the other one. I'm gonna go ahead and knock out all these, get the brackets on there, and we'll pick back up from there. Well, I just realized something interesting. I thought these were 10, and so that's what I was using, and so no wonder it was spinning. I'm actually surprised I got it to move at all. These are actually 9mm, so let's see if this works any better. Oh my goodness. That worked so much better. So that's in. We'll get this other one going and do the rest of them. We'll see how well this works now that I have the correct size socket here. And yeah, we're gonna get these on here, then we'll loosen them up, we'll play around, make sure they're all even. Okay, so got that one in. We're gonna back that out just a little bit, and we will get all this stuff cleaned up. A lot of metal shaving, so be careful with your eyes. I should have eye protection on, but I don't. But anyways, got these on. We're gonna get these going, and we'll be done with that. Okay, so here's something I've come across. These self-tapping screws work great, they go right in, but I don't know if it's just because these brackets are bigger than the regular heat exchanger brackets, but they're barely holding on to the bracket, and I don't trust it enough. Even when I sank this one down all the way, it almost went through the bracket. So if you've been working on cars long enough, you probably are like me and you have a jar full of just spare screws and washers and whatnot like that. So I would grab some of my extra washers here, and I'm going to use these washers to sink down onto the bracket to make sure that is nice and secure. And I'll post up a little picture that shows, it's a perfect overhead of showing exactly what was going on here. So we'll go ahead and get this back on. That washer might be a little big. We got the brackets all mounted up now. They're on there good and tight. I put some extra washers on there just to make sure that we had plenty of surface area over our brackets. They're on there nice and tight. We're gonna go get the bar onto the car. We're gonna do a test fit of the heat exchanger into the brackets. Like I said, we might have to bend these a little bit here and there, and then we'll check for level. And if it's not level, we might have to loosen these up a little bit to figure that out. But from here on, it's just a little bit of adjustment. We'll get on there, and then after it's mounted to the car, we will work on connecting the heat exchanger. After it's all connected, then we will show you guys how to do a manual bleed and completely bleed the entire system of the vehicle. So let's get to it. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get the crash bar installed. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna spray down the mounting points just so that it's a little bit lubricated with some soapy water. That'll help the crash bar go into its fitting correctly. Just because it's painted on the outside, I don't wanna like hit it with my rubber mount, potentially mess up that paint that I just sprayed on there because it's not fully set. So I'm gonna go ahead and get all the screws ready and put this on there, get the crash bar mounted, and then we'll get the heat exchanger mounted to it. Okay, so now we're just going to tighten our bolts back up and we're gonna fit the heat exchanger. Okay, so our crash bar is fully connected to the car. We're gonna do a little test fit here with the heat exchanger. We're gonna set this down in here, and I'll be the first to admit it's not perfectly centered on the crash bar, but it'll still work out just fine. So let's get it on here and take a look. And we can see that each of the brackets is just maybe a centimeter or two too close. So we are gonna bend those out just a little bit to fit the heat exchanger. So let's get this out of here and we'll work on bending those out just a bit. So you can actually bend these out by hand while it's on the car. You just need to do it just a little bit. Don't go crazy overboard. Now, if you do it too much, it's not the end of the world. The bolts will pull it back together. All right, so let's do another test fit. Let's see if we need to come out any more. All right, so now we're inside of the brackets. So I'll be able to get something to set the heat exchanger on while I get some of the bolts started. So we'll do that next. All right, so I don't have a second pair of hands out here. This is where having a second person to do this would be extremely helpful, even down to getting this thing fixed onto the crash bar. But since I don't have a second set of hands, I just got a couple 2x4s and my jack stand, and I get that up underneath the heat exchanger to hold it up while I get my bracket mounting screws into the heat exchanger. Once I do that, I'll be able to tighten them down, and from there on, it's just a matter of connecting the heat exchanger and then bleeding the whole system. So I'm gonna go ahead and connect everything, and then we'll talk about making the actual coolant connections. Okay guys, we have the heat exchanger fully bolted up to the crash bar. These were super simple to get in. This side, it's a little far to the right, so this kind of comes into play, and you got this little plastic barrier, but you can push that out of the way and get a socket in here, but it was still a little tricky with this to get to these, but we got it. It's on there, and it is pretty much perfectly level. Obviously the car's on jack stand, so that's probably gonna vary a little bit, but it's, you know, good enough for us. So everything here is looking good. The next thing we have to do is connect all the hoses, which we're gonna have to cut those and get them fitted correctly, but that shouldn't be too big of an issue. And then we can start to put coolant in this thing. Okay, so we have two different lines. I'm gonna find the diagram to show the actual outflow versus inflow. I just know that I had it backwards the last time. So on the last time, I took my upper pipe and I ran it to the left behind the cooler over to the passenger side of the car and connected it, and then I let the bottom pipe connect to the driver's side, and it needs to be opposite. This pipe is going to be connecting to the driver's side. This pipe is going to be ran behind the heat exchanger and over to the end. So we need to look at our distances of hoses. We need to start to figure out exactly like how much hose we're going to need here and there. This, I think I can actually just be able to connect this directly to the bottom line here. I don't think I'm going to need to actually add any hose here, which is good. MercRacing's install kit came with 2 of the metal connectors, and I think so this design is meant to have this connect to this, which my heat exchanger is kind of right of center on my crash bar, and I'm glad, because I think if it was any further left, this might not be able to connect, because we're gonna have this U-shaped silicone hose connect here, go around the back, and then this is going to have to connect to a piece of coolant hose. So we're going to have to use a connector there. Then that coolant hose will connect to the OEM coolant line, so there'll be a connector there. So that's where my two connectors are going to be used. So if there was meant to have any extra hose put in between here, I'd need a third connector. I have some extra connectors from my last setup, which I can always use if I find that this being connected to here is just too tight, but just something to be aware of and to check out when you're doing this install. So when it comes to this, this pipe is not made to fit perfectly, because you know there's variances in how people install these, and different cars are going to be using these, and so we need to look at this, because if I just put this on as is, you can see it come way too far out. But if I bring it up and I kind of cut it right before the MercRacing logo there, and I cut it right there, that will probably be about a perfect connection there. So I'm going to cut the hose just before the MercRacing logo and get this connected, and then I'll have to measure from the end of this piece to the OEM line and get that piece cut and connected. And I'm going to go ahead and try and connect this piece to here. When you're doing this, make sure you get your hose clamps on over your hoses before you actually connect them. All right, so when you're doing this, make sure you keep your hose clamp on. You don't want to bring that off until you have everything nice and secure. And remember, you're not going to take the clamp off until the entire system is connected. So we'll get this off. Once again, a little bit of soapy water will be your friend here trying to slide these connections on. If you try and do it without any lubrication, it's going to be a little bit difficult. So you just spray that a little bit, don't spray any into the actual line, and then going to just push this on and get it on there as far as we can. Make sure we get our connector over. All right, got that on there pretty deep, and you'll be able to feel the actual ridge there that you want to get your connector past. So Okay, so once I release this, that should release a little bit of slack here in this line. It's kind of tight. We'll see how I like that once we get everything done. I might decide to add a little bit of tubing to it to make sure it's not under stress the entire time. So now we need to measure and cut this. Like we said, we're gonna go ahead and cut it right behind the MercRacing emblem. I got a piece of, I guess technically this is PVC cutter. You're gonna need some kind of hose cutter to make good, clean, solid cuts. This stuff is not simple to cut, so we're gonna go ahead and get it right there just on the edge of the M. Let me zoom this camera out so you guys can actually see what I'm doing. So, I'm gonna get it right there on the edge of the M and make sure it's a good, clean, level cut. And it was. So, that right there, we're gonna feed this through and do a test. That looks like that'll be about a perfect setup for this this hose. It goes over this little support, so it's not going to be falling down or anything like that. It'll be suspended up there. So we'll go ahead and get this mounted up now. Same thing. Spray some soapy water on there. Make this easy to slide on. Make sure that MercRacing logo is nice and high up to where you can see it. We're going to get that as far on there as we can. Push this hose clamp over that. All right, so we got it started. We'll move on to the other end. We're going to need to measure the distance from this to the other OEM line, and we're going to cut that tubing. And then I'm going to take a look at this and see what I think about how much this is stretching. I mean, this stuff is durable coolant hose. It's not really brittle or anything like that, so I'm not terribly worried about it splitting, but I don't know, I'm just going to kind of think on it for a little bit. Okay, now we're going to measure the distance that we need between the end of that hose from MercRacing that we just put on to the coolant pump, the coolant hose on the passenger side of the car. And this doesn't have to be an exact, super perfect measurement because you got play here with the hoses. And I'm showing 25.5 inches. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that, and then we'll get that connected up here. We've got our hose laid out, so we got a little marker here to mark where we need to cut. Got our tape measure, so let's see here, 25.5 inches. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. So that's about right there. And then this leaves you plenty of leftover in case you have to do this again. Remember, regular scissors won't make this cut, guys. You got to get some kind of a coolant hose cutter, PVC cutter works. And it's basically just a big razor blade and a handle. So we've got our coolant hose. I'm going to go over there and just do a test fit, and then we'll be back here to put the connectors in each end. So the piece of a hose that we cut is actually just a little too long, so we're gonna snip off about 1 inch. That way it's not just hanging down way too low on the car. We don't want it to have just a bunch of slack hose down there. So I'm just gonna snip off a little bit. And now we're gonna put our connectors on there. As always, a little bit of soapy water goes a long way. I guess I should get my hose connectors on this before we put both of those on there. Stand by. All right, and by hose connectors, obviously, I mean hose clamps. So we're gonna go ahead and get these all routed up. There we go, tighten that back down a little bit. And then this will be ready to install. And then once this is on, then we are gonna be ready to put coolant into the system. Let's go check it out. Next, we just get under here, and it's just as simple as connecting the two of them. And once again, make sure your hose clamps are always kind of facing your working direction so it's easy to work on them. Oh, almost forgot my soapy water, hang on. Okay, tragedy averted. Once again, always remember the hose clamp goes on first. And I'm not gonna quite tighten this down yet. I wanna get it completely connected. That way I know which way it needs to angle. You can still see there's even still a good amount of slack here, so it'll still rest in the bottom of the pan. Oh, almost forgot to put the hose connector on that one. All right, so it's got some slack to it, but that'll just rest in the bottom. It's not an excessive amount of slack, so I'm good with that. So we will go ahead and tighten these down. Okay, so now everything is actually connected. So we can undo our coolant clamps and make sure there's no leaks, because this is gonna fill with some coolant here from the engine. So we're gonna go ahead and undo these. See what happens. Cool, we got no leaks there. We have no leaks over here. So there's not too much tension on that right side. I'll bring you over here, look. This is the side where we just connected the line directly to the heat exchanger, and there's plenty of play there. I don't think it's overdone. So I'll definitely monitor it, but it looks like it's good to go. One thing that I don't like, I really don't like the idea of the coolant hose just hanging down like crazy. And so I'm going to try and do something. I don't know, let me zoom in here and see if you can see it. If you can see the focus, if you can see that little opening in the bottom of the radiator there, there's one there, there's one over there, and there's one on the far right side right about there. I think I'm going to try and zip tie my coolant line alongside that and hopefully just hold it up there nice and steady so it's not just resting down there by itself, just on its own, resting on the bottom of the dirt shield from the bumper. Let's talk about bleeding your coolant system. There are two ways to bleed the coolant system on this vehicle. The most popular one that people always talk about is using a vacuum fill tool. We actually did that in our original MercRacing Heat Exchanger install video. You can see us using that and talk about how we use that. That's a really good way to do a decent job of getting air out of the system, but it's still not 100%. These engines are notorious for holding pockets of air, which lead to higher IATs. Especially if it's in the engine loop, you can get hot spots that can cause engine damage or premature engine wear. Heat is the killer of these engines. So it's imperative that you do a very good job of bleeding your engine. We're gonna do a full manual bleed tonight. That is the only way to ensure that you completely rid the system of air. You can do a vacuum fill and get most of the air out and then do a manual bleed. That'll make life a little bit easier. But we're gonna show you how to do it in case you don't have that bleed tool. By the way, the bleed tools, or that vacuum tool, I think you can get it for like 80 bucks on Amazon now. It's not the $200 tool from Schwab that you have to get anymore. There's a few companies that make them. So the way this works is pretty much via gravity. Air always wants to go up, right? So we bleed from the lowest point to the highest point. On a stock system, there are 3 places you bleed from. There are 2 supercharger bleed screws, one for each side of the supercharger because there's an intercooler on each side. And you can see our video on replacing the bleed screws. If you haven't done that already, I highly suggest you get rid of the plastic OEM ones and put the 034 Motorsport metal bleed screws in there. You'll thank yourself if you have to do this a few times. So those are located on the back of the supercharger, one on each side. There's a heater core bleed. It's a port basically. It's not even a screw, and I'm going to show you in detail where these are, but it's under the plenum cover underneath your strut tower sway bar, for lack of a better word, or strut bar. You'll see it in there. There's 2 heater hoses that go into the firewall, and it's the one on the left. And basically you're going to undo a clamp, pull the hose back until you expose the hole, and that's where you're going to bleed from. But now that we've added a aftermarket heat exchanger, if you've got a Gen 2 or higher, you have a bleed port here. If you have a Gen 1, which is what I had on my car earlier, you do not have a bleed valve, and that's gonna make life a little bit more difficult for you. So in that instance, you have to bleed this thing through the actual exit pipe here. And I've got a video on how to do that as well. And basically, a lot of people like to try and fill these up first and then do it, but the easiest way to me is to get it in there and to just go ahead and push air out with liquid. So the big thing is we have our coolant reservoir over here, and we need that above everything else. Now, right now, the rear of the car is on the ground, and so that means the engine is elevated and at an angle. Because of that, the lowest points go the heat exchanger. That's our lowest point right now. That'll be the first thing we bleed. Once we bleed that, we will move to the heater core port in the back under the plenum cover, because that is slightly below the supercharger bleed screws. And then when that's done, we will bleed the passenger side bleed screw of the supercharger, and then we'll bleed the driver side. And when we do that, once we're done with the heater core, we are going to actually put a wheel on the car and lower that side of the car so that the supercharger is canted, because air will always go to the highest point. Now, when it comes to doing the supercharger, the bleed screws are actually higher than your reservoir, and that's not good. You need that reservoir above this. So when we drop that side of the car down, it's gonna bring this side up and that side down. That'll help get this higher. We're gonna fill this up, and then we might even unconnect it so that we can kind of lift it up a little bit higher. That way we can make sure that this is always above all of our bleed areas, because gravity is gonna be your friend here. So when we go to do this, right now we're fine. We're going to start putting coolant into this, and we're gonna fill this up, and we're gonna unscrew the bleed screw just a little bit. It's just like your ones on the supercharger. It's got a little line built into the thread so that air can escape. When you bleed everything, what's gonna happen is you're gonna see coolant and bubbles come out, and you wanna bleed it until it's just straight, clear coolant coming out, okay? Once you see that, then you can tighten it back up. Then this will be properly, completely bled. If you don't have the bleed valve, what you want to do on the Gen 1 is you want to lower the passenger side of the car so where the heat exchanger is at an angle. When it's at that angle, all the air will come to the top right. Remember, it kind of ends there. And then you can fill it up until, make sure you have your hose ready to go. You can fill it up until it's just pure coolant coming out, and then you can connect your hose. So we're going to show you all these steps in detail. It's a little bit of a process. It's going to involve having to run the car. If you have an OBD11, you'll be able to use the coolant circuit system. You'll be able to get your coolant pump to turn on and cycle coolant through the car, so you don't have to actually turn your car on. If you don't have VCDS or OBD11 to do that, then what you're gonna have to do, and this is just for the rear of the car and the heater core, you're gonna have to turn your car on and get up to about 2,000 RPMs, and you have to run it. And there's some other things. We're gonna have to turn the heat on, but the fan off, a bunch of different little things. We're gonna go step by step. This is gonna be a long part of the video to make sure that we get this right. And then I'm also gonna take this whole section and make it its own standalone video for you guys. So bear with me, let's get this done. Okay, everybody, everything is buttoned up. We just don't have the bumper on yet. We're gonna put that on in just a moment. It's been a pretty long day. I think I'm gonna wait to Datalog tomorrow. I'm gonna get it all put back together. I'm gonna take it for a quick spin just to make sure everything's functioning correctly. But just a quick walkthrough of it. It is sitting nice and beefy in there, looking good. I'm very excited to have this on here. Excuse my hand. That is a good looking heat exchanger, you might say. Of course, we had to put the MercRacing decal on top. That is looking awesome. So, This is probably going to end up being a long DIY video, so if you stuck it out, I appreciate it. I hope this clarifies a lot of things. Had to correct some bad information from my first video with the way that the lines are routed. You know, if you're stage 1, it's not really going to matter, but once you start going to stage 2 and higher, you want to, 1, make sure your system is completely and fully bled, and then also make sure everything's routed correctly. But if you guys have questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, especially about the bleed process, if you notice anything about that I could have done differently or could have done better or whatnot, please hit me up in the comments and let me know. Share this video with people. I think this might be the first official video that actually has a 3.0T bleed process step-by-step in it. Remember, I'm also going to just separate that entire section and make its own video. But we are going to data log, and that'll be here in the next part of this video, showing the data logs. I've got a log that was from before we did all the work, and I'll put a screenshot of all the information there. And then I'm going to do a data log of this and do the same thing. And then hopefully tomorrow I'll be able to get in there and install that CWA 100, and we'll put that on there and do a data log for that. And that'll be its own completely separate video as well. Hi. So you might notice I have a different shirt on. It's daylight outside, and I am back out in my car with the front bumper off again. You might ask yourself why. Well, last night when I went to put everything back together after installing the MercRacing 4.0T heat exchanger, I got everything buttoned up, everything was looking great, looking pretty, and then all of a sudden, when I put my front bumper on, I couldn't get the bottom of my bumper to connect to the bottom skid plate. I worked on it for about 10 minutes and it just didn't go together, which every other time it's always gone right back together. Couldn't figure it out. And then I figured out that it is because the heat exchanger itself was mounted too low. This heat exchanger, let me get this turned around here, is a very big heat exchanger. And the way it was mounted on the crash bar, it was mounted too low, and so the bottom of the bumper kept hitting the bottom of the heat exchanger. So this is something that we didn't know about and something I didn't know to look for. And I'll come over here to the crash bar and show you. You know, I just centered my brackets up as best I could with the center of the bar like I did my last heat exchanger, and that's just not gonna work. This is the top of the crash bar right here. So I'm gonna have to take these and re-drill them higher, as high up as I can basically, and push this bracket up. So that is unfortunate. This one's already, like, I adjusted this and pushed this bracket as far up as I could and hit that screw. And so I'm gonna have to see if I can get a little bit more teeth in there. Otherwise I might just have to bring it over a little bit and do it. But I'm gonna have to adjust these. So when you go to do this, if you're doing this on your A6 or A7, make sure that these are mounted up high and make sure that you've got plenty of room to slide these brackets up to get the heat exchanger up and not interfere with the bottom of your bumper. Another thing is, you can see this nice little ding in my heat exchanger. That is because if you have a night vision camera, it protrudes on the back of your bumper here a good bit. And when you go to put your bumper back on, it's gonna press into the heat exchanger because the brackets aren't quite long enough. We need basically like another 1/4 inch of depth, and they would have worked perfectly. And you can see they were maxed out all the way to the back on each of these. So I need like another 1/4 inch of depth. So I'm gonna take these off. I'm going to go with the self-tapping screws, and I'm going to go to the hardware store. I'm going to try and find some thick washers to go underneath these and see if I can space it out enough to where this doesn't press into the heat exchanger, or I'm sorry, to where it doesn't press the heat exchanger into my night vision camera. And because that also makes it really hard to get the bumper to sit on the car correctly as well. So that's what I'm doing, and then I'll button this all back up and finally go get some logs done. Okay, I'm going to show you guys what I'm doing to alleviate my issues here. So this is how I had it on the car already, and you can see the self-tapping screws here. I added these washers because these self-tapping screws weren't quite wide enough to make me feel comfortable. So I went ahead and added those washers, and you can see how it sat down here below. This is what the self-tapping screw looks like that it came with. So this is what my fix looks like. Let me get down over here. You can see that I've added some spacers underneath it. These spacers are just these washers here that I stacked up 3 deep. And then to account for the extra length, I went and I bought some beefier self-tapping screws here. You can see they're a little bit longer to accommodate for the length here. They're slightly thicker as well. So the hold, I got some good thick washers for the top. And what I did was, instead of re-drilling, I actually used the same exact holes that were there already. What I did was I unscrewed the other two original self-tappers, pulled them out, and then I was playing around with it and I slid the bracket up, and both holes are in the same slot here, and they're tightened down hard. I mean, this thing is not coming loose. So I think this is gonna work, because I measured it out. This is where the original spots were. So this is where the original top screw was, right here. And that's over an inch of difference there in height. I think this is gonna get me exactly what I want. I think that space is gonna be exactly what I need for my night vision camera. I think this is gonna work. So wish me luck. Okay guys, so we've got the car completely put back together. We have fixed all the issues with fitment on the heat exchanger. So remember this thing here, I accidentally mounted too low and it interfered with the bumper connected to the skid plate. So I had to redo that and bring it up here. And then I also found out that the bracket didn't keep it out deep enough, and I accidentally punctured a hole into the heat exchanger with my night vision camera. And luckily, Jose at MercRacing was able to overnight me another one to fix this. I got a bunch of spacers and I got a bunch of washers and built spacers to space this out. We got plenty of room here on the A6, you know, on the 3.0T engines. We got tons of room so we can back it out a good ways. I just backed it out about 1/4 of an inch. But anyways, I've got the car completely put back together. I've got it on the ground. It's at its normal ride height, and I made sure I've got a good amount of coolant in the reservoir. And now I'm going to do one final bleed of the heat exchanger. I know everything else is bled correctly. I'm going to do one final bleed of this and make sure there's nothing in there. So we're going to open this up and see if we get air coming out. And you see those bubbles? That means there's a little bit of air left. And so we just need to monitor the coolant reservoir, and we need to leave this on here bubbling until we get just straight coolant coming out. In order for this to happen, you have to make sure you have the cap to your coolant reservoir off so that there's no vacuum created. And as your coolant goes down, make sure that you're filling up your reservoir so that you don't get air brought into the system at all. It looks like the air bubbles have stopped coming out. I'm just gonna back this all the way out and take a look. Yeah, now we just got clear coolant coming out, so we can close this up. And that means the heat exchanger is completely 100% bled, no air in the system there. And I'm just gonna, for fun, I'm gonna go ahead and check my supercharger bleed screws as well, just to make sure that there's no air there. And then we're gonna take the car out for a spin and do some data logging. And now we have one final thing to do to complete this install. No MercRacing install would be complete without the official MercRacing sticker. Okay everybody, so we are going to data log and see what our IATs are with the new heat exchanger installed. I've got my integrated engineering data logger up. I'm going to go ahead and get out to the road. I'm going to do this on, obviously being safe and secure the entire time, and we'll do a 4th gear pull. I'm also going to do a pull from a dig just to get a couple different kinds of logs and see what happens here. But I'll turn the camera back on when we start our first pull. All right, here we go. Starting at 2,000 RPMs in 4th gear. That felt like a really strong pull. We'll see what happens. The IAT started off, I think, right around 32 degrees Celsius, so we'll see what happens. All right, everybody, I really hope that you guys found this video helpful and informative. I tried to be as detailed as possible. Obviously, this wasn't a brand new install from the beginning, but this should still show anyone who hasn't done this or doesn't have an aftermarket heat exchanger how to install one on their car. Everything is routed the right way this time, instead of like the last time where I kind of messed that up. But if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Once again, a massive shout out to Jose at MercRacing. I know he is an incredibly busy guy who has got a lot going on. He is just working his butt off and still at the same time trying to develop new and awesome products for the 3.0T community. And so just thank you so much, Jose, for investing in our channel and investing in the C7 community as well as the rest of the 3.0T community with Audi cars. We can't thank you enough for these awesome products. Can't wait to get this thing tuned up a little bit more and really take advantage of this heat exchanger. And then, eventually we're going to be adding on the CWA 100 coolant pump, and we should see even lower IATs. That'll be another video with some data logs from that. And then we'll eventually divorce the system with MercRacing's divorce tank and do something a little special there too for you guys. So anyways, if you guys have questions, comments, comment below, let us know. And as always, thank you for the support, and we'll see you guys at the next video.